All right, today we're going to unpack a pretty powerful concept, alternative media. Now, you've almost certainly heard that term thrown around, but what does it actually mean? We're about to dig into the story of media that operates on the fringes, in the gaps, and a lot of the time in direct opposition to the mainstream. So, let's get right into it.
Okay, so think about this for a second. What on earth connects a pirate radio station broadcasting defiantly from a ship back in the 60s to, a massive leak of classified documents that literally sends shockwaves through governments all over the world to a single hashtag that ignites a global protest? I mean, they seem like they're from different planets, right? But they all share this common DNA. They are all really potent examples of alternative media.
So how do we even start to wrap our heads around all this? Well, a scholar named Leah A gives us this brilliant way to think about it. She defines alternative media as the act of reworking existing technologies and formats to contest or bypass dominant institutions and codes. Now pay close attention to those verbs: rework, contest, and bypass. And here's the kicker. This isn't about inventing some brand new, shiny technology from scratch. Nope. It's about taking the tools that already exist and flipping them on their head to challenge the way things are.
But to really get this, we've got to go back in time. This idea of pushing back against the mainstream didn't just pop up with the internet. Oh no, it has these deep, really fascinating roots that basically set the stage for everything we're seeing today.
I mean, just look at how this whole thing evolved. It started with the underground press, people using basic printing presses to get countercultural ideas out there. Then you get pirate radio, right? They literally hijacked the airwaves, totally shattering the monopoly that state broadcasters had. By the 80s and 90s, video activism put cameras in the hands of everyday people, letting them tell their own stories. And then Web 2.0 came along and just blew the doors wide open. You can see this incredible thread of rebellion, with each generation building on the tools and the tactics of the one before it.
So Lievrouw breaks this all down into 5, I think, really fascinating categories or genres. First up, you've got culture jamming, and if you've ever seen a clever, doctored-up ad that flips the original message, you know exactly what this is. Then there's alternative computing. This is the world of open-source software, hackers, crypto, all aimed at building tech outside of corporate control. Third, participatory journalism. Think of early blogs or sites like Indie Media, where that line between the person writing the story and the person reading it just completely vanishes. Fourth is mediated mobilization, using things like text messages and social media to organize in real time. And last but not least, common knowledge. Projects like Wikipedia that are all about building these massive shared information resources for absolutely everyone.
And this quote from her, it just hits the nail on the head. We're not talking about some completely separate alternative media industry over here. We're talking about a set of practices. It's about how you take a camera, a website, a hashtag, all mainstream tools, and you reassemble them for oppositional ends. See? It's all about how you use the tool, not just what the tool is. That's the secret sauce. That's what makes it alternative.
Okay, so fast forward to the early 2000s, and there's a really important shift in thinking. Researchers in this space started to realize they might be looking at this whole thing a little bit wrong. And this is where thinkers like Chris Atten and Nick Kudry come in and suggest this crucial pivot, a whole new way of seeing the problem.
You see, for a long time, the thinking was pretty black and white. You had the mainstream over here and the alternative over there. Kind of like good guys versus bad guys. But that's just way too simple, right? The new way of looking at it was so much more insightful. Instead of just sorting media into 2 buckets, the focus shifted to analyzing the practices of inclusion and exclusion. So the real question, the one that mattered, became whose voice is actually getting through? And, maybe even more importantly, whose voice is being completely shut out?
And this right here, this quote from Atten and Kudry, this is the absolute core of that new way of seeing things. The focus is on practices that make space for voices that are structurally excluded. And that phrase, structurally excluded, is so important. It doesn't just mean someone was accidentally overlooked. It means the system, the corporate public sphere, is designed in a way that keeps certain voices out of the conversation. So this is all about carving out a space to finally be heard.
Now, what's so cool is that this new way of thinking didn't just happen in some academic bubble. No, it slammed right into the explosion of digital technology, which basically put these ideas on steroids and completely changed the game for activists and social movements.
And scholar Chris Atten pointed out these 4 massive trends that were driving the whole thing. First, a huge do-it-yourself culture just exploded because technology got cheaper and easier to use. All of a sudden, you didn't need $1 million studio to make something. Second, networked distribution meant people could totally bypass the old gatekeepers. Why beg a TV network when you can just upload it yourself? Third, movements could now shape their own image, speaking directly to the world without a filter. And fourth, brand new funding models like crowdfunding meant these projects could survive and even thrive without corporate ad dollars.
And look, this wasn't just theory. This stuff was actually happening out in the real world. You had indie media creating a global network for citizen journalism. You had the famous McLibel case, where two activists used the very early internet to take on a giant like McDonald's. And they won. And movements like Reclaim the Streets were using new tech to organize these massive, incredible protest street parties. This was it. This was the digital transformation in action.
Allenton has this perfect word to sum it all up, bricolage. It's a French word, and it basically just means tinkering, creatively piecing together whatever tools and parts you happen to have lying around. The digital shift wasn't some big, single, revolutionary explosion. It was more like a continuous, super clever process of tinkering and adapting, mixing and matching technology, identity, and funding to get a message out into the world.
Okay, so that brings us right up to today. We've gone through the history, we've gone through the theory, but this story is nowhere near over. The conversation is always changing, and it's throwing up brand new challenges for researchers and, let's be honest, for all of us trying to make sense of the media world we live in.
So right now, researchers in this field are really wrestling with three huge questions. First, the really practical one: how do these projects keep the lights on? How do they actually stay afloat financially? Second, the big theoretical one: how do we even think about power when the gatekeeper isn't a person at a news desk, but an algorithm? And third, the policy question: how do we handle platform governance, where one decision by a huge company to change their rules can just wipe out an alternative voice overnight?
And all of that, it leaves us with this one final, massive question for our time. In an age where just a few corporations own the platforms we all use, and where hidden algorithms decide what we see and what we don't, what does the word alternative even mean anymore? How do you bypass a system when you're kind of fundamentally a part of it? It's a huge question and something to think about the next time you're scrolling. Thanks for digging into this with us.